Hey there, everyone. It is JV, your narrator. I wanted to give the most special of special thank yous to Erin Kyan. I wanted to thank Erin Kyan for helping me edit this episode. So a few weeks ago, I was really sick. I literally could not hear. I could not hear out of one ear. It was really bad. And given that already I can only hear out of one ear as it is, it was really difficult to actually do any work and editing to get this up to date and going, and Erin stepped in and was a huge help on editing the audio for the narrator for this episode, because when I was recording this episode, I made a lot of flubs, more than honestly I thought made any sense for me to be making, considering I wrote this entire thing. But Erin was a huge help, and I wanted to thank him from the bottom of my heart. And I wanted to also recommend the Love Luck podcast, which is an absolutely wonderful show that Erin has made and is a part of, and it is phenomenal, and I love it so much. So please check out the Love Luck podcast, and thank you again, Erin. And without further ado, let's get into the show for this week. Fly high, heroes. My name is Jordan Redfield Wade. By day, I'm a philanthropist and private investigator, but by night, I protect the people of Newark City in a different way.
My name, champ, is RedWing.
As she lay dying, I promised my mother that I would fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves, and I refused to let her down. I am the defender of Newark City. I am RedWing. As we walked through the darkened corridor upon exiting the strange hidden elevator, the only thing that was really sticking in my mind was a memory. My mother had a scented lotion that she would wear, and it made her smell like chocolate, almonds, and honey. To this day, when I'm unable to sleep, or I'm anxious about a case or something that I have going on in my life, I make myself a cup of hot chocolate with some honey-coated almonds. I stopped walking, closed my eyes, and breathed in deep. I could smell it on the air. One of the last people to be in here was was our mother. I gently gripped Jeremy's arm and made him stop and smell. You smell that, Jeremy? Mom always used to smell like that. There was a silent moment between us, wherein I saw a tear roll down his cheek, and a half-smile creep across his face. I put my other hand on his shoulder, and made him look me in the eyes. It was like looking in a mirror, and I was almost taken aback for a minute. I smiled. You have to know, Jer, that our mom loved you. I'm sure Dad would have loved you too, and I'm sure he would have taken you in. We may never know, but I feel that. The sins of your father are on him, and only him. Jeremy nodded and smiled back. I know, Frey, I'm sure. I just wish I could hear that from them, you know? I nodded, putting my arm over his shoulder for a second. I took a deep breath, which Jeremy mimicked. We strolled further down the hallway. We entered what appeared to be a large atrium. I felt around the wall for a light switch, and then I found it. I turned on the light, and I gasped. Mais amis.
Boys, what is this even?
Before us was a large room, roughly the same length as the ballroom which I reasoned we were underneath. A few paces in front of us, on a slightly raised platform, was a computer station so advanced that it must have made Joanna swoon. We were slightly raised on this platform, so everyone except Joe stepped down on the tiny steps that were on the side. On our left, along the wall, there were 6 glass display cases, which contained shadowed, vaguely humanoid figures we couldn't identify. On the right wall, there was weightlifting gear, dummies that were worn with use and time, and a supply of weapons fit to outfit an entire platoon. The ground was made up of metallic squares, laying like tile on the floor. I could feel, when I closed my eyes, that we were inside of the Earth itself. What is this place? Jer? I think we just discovered our parents' bat cave. Hell if I know. Jeremy turned to look at me and shrugged. Jeremy looked just as awestruck as I was. Marilyn hung back slightly and turned to look up at Joe.
Joanna, you're a technopath, right? Do you think you can get the lights on in here and maybe activate the computers?
You got it.
The lights I had turned on earlier only illuminated the small computer area. Joe's eyes glowed for a second, and the overhead lights of the entire room came on, and then they dimmed on their own, shirking Joanna's command. I looked back at her as her face turned to that of confusion. She touched the computer screen, but nothing happened. I walked back to where Joanna stood.
It's not responding to me. It's barely even talking to me. Like, you know how most of the non-networked items in our apartment actually talk to me and each other? This one's only saying one word, and it's really hard to make out.
What's the word, Joe?
I think it's your name. It sounds like a woman saying Jordan.
I raised an eyebrow and looked at the computer. I reached out my hand to touch the screen. As soon as my fingertip brushed it, I felt something crackle to life in the air. It felt like something had broken. The computer abruptly began to whir back to life, and that caused the back wall to illuminate. The back wall of the room was technically a large screen monitor. On the back wall, the family crest that was emblazoned on my chest floated and spun around like a spinning coin. I used the mouse to click on the symbol. The symbol stopped spinning and another window opened up. It was a video file recorded in the same room that we were in that very moment. I gasped. The man and woman in the video were my mother and father. The video had been taken approximately 25 years ago. They were smiling, but looked serious all the same. My mom had on the same face she had when I asked her what happened to Sherlock Holmes and the Hound of the Baskervilles. They were 35 when they were murdered, and it struck me in that moment just how young they truly had been when they died. When they opened their mouths to speak, the sound filled the hall.
Hello, my sons.
Terrence Redfield Wade smiled a big smile. I smiled almost involuntarily. There was a silence in the video, while Dad put his arm around my mom. When he spoke next, his tone was solemn.
Son, if you are seeing this now, it means we are not able to watch you grow up into the men we prayed you would become. It appears, however, that not only have you grown up exactly as you were supposed to, but you have found each other. When we sealed this room for the final time, we enchanted it to make sure it would only open if you boys were present together. It is time for us to reveal the story to you. A story we never told you before. A story we could only tell you once you'd already made the choice to fight for what you believe in and devote your life to keeping the city and its people safe. We couldn't be more proud.
For generations, our family fought to keep the city safe, and also improved it with everything we have. You know we've done that through the RW collectors, of course, but we've done so much more.
No doubt you've come to learn that magic is not only real, but that this place is one of those focal points of a deeper and more intense magic than other places. Beneath the city lies a large collection of magic energy. Most ordinary people cannot tap into it, and most magic users cannot really handle that kind of magical energy without it consuming them entirely. That doesn't stop people from trying. And because people keep trying, we have to prevent that from happening. Most of the generations choose to do this alone, but our generation learned that we couldn't do it alone. Look over at the cases on the wall.
As he said this, The lights in the display cases turned themselves on. I put my hands over my mouth to keep from gasping again. Each display case contained a mannequin, and each mannequin was wearing a suit of a vigilante. The one in the center was made of black leather, with the family crest emblazoned on it in gold and red. It looked almost exactly like my suit, but this one had a black cape with 2 red sleeve caps and gold lines running down the back, and a black cowl and a red mask. If I had to make an honest comparison to mine, it looked like the Batman version of my suit. It was large and imposing, but absolutely badass. On the immediate left was an almost matching suit, but designed for a female frame, and with white and silver details. On the left was a black cloak with purple trim and a purple domino mask. Just to the right of the suit with the red and gold emblem, there was a men's black bodysuit with green elements and a green belt. To the right of that one was a women's white bodysuit with gold trim, similar in shape and color to the one Marilyn had created for Joe earlier in the evening. The one on the end was empty. I gawked at them, open-mouthed, letting it sink in what I was witnessing.
Along that wall, you will see the suits that belong to our team. My suit in the center, your mother's next to mine. The yellow one belonged to Anne-Marie Lovelace, a wonderful technopath. The green one belonged to Wilson LaCroix, the country's most powerful medium and witch doctor. The purple cloak belonged to Cassandra Payne, the most powerful enchantress in the world. And in the last one, that belonged to my twin brother, Isaac.
We would only break out these suits when Uncle Jared called us with a case that he couldn't handle. Or perhaps had a magical influence. That didn't happen too often, but when it did, the team was always there and ready. We called ourselves the Guardians.
The video cut to a photo of everyone in their suits. My heart swelled with pride at seeing my father, Terrence, in his suit. He looked so strong, as did my mother. I looked over at Joanna, who was seeing one of the only pictures of her mother that still remained in the world. She had her hands to her mouth and a silent tear was rolling down her cheek. Honestly, she looked a lot like her mother in that picture. I smiled to think of what this might have felt like for her.
I'm hoping that you by now have figured out your own team.
My mom paused, shaking her head slightly, before continuing, sounding a wee bit annoyed.
Well, Cassandra read in the tea leaves that Joanna would be like her mother, maybe even exceeding her abilities. Wilson's son Kyan would definitely inherit the family trait. And I trust you will align yourself with the correct allies in this fight.
Sons, we have compiled in here lists of what you might need to know, including a training regimen for the others on the team to be able to learn the various arts, both martial and magical. Joanna should be able to locate that on this computer. Lists of everyone we've ever fought, names to look out for and be wary of. All of that will be included. Stay safe and fly high.
The video ended there, with my father's and mother's faces staring out at us. Silence filled the hall for a few moments before another image popped up on the screen. It was a human face, but it was entirely chrome and metallic.
Greetings. Welcome to the Combat Readiness Virtual Utility Simulation System, also known as the Corvus System. I am Birdkeeper. Would you like to initiate a simulation?
I had every intention of answering no. I was in fact about to say no. But my father's voice spoke up from the video that had been paused and said yes before I could say anything else. I looked at the little image of my dad on the screen, not sure of what to feel. My father in the video shrugged.
Yes, Birdkeeper. Let's see what you've got, my son. Do me proud.
Commencing sequence 1A. Activating robotic adversarial units 48L and 96E.
The metallic face smiled, which was deeply off-putting. 2 panels on the floor suddenly rose up, and a robot stepped out from the small storage area that the tile apparently was. One of the robots was about 7 feet tall, built like a wrestler, and had 4 muscular arms. When I say muscular, I mean that the casing for the wires was bulging in much the same way that veins do on a bodybuilder. In one set of arms, he was holding a pair of 3-foot-long flaming swords. The second set of arms were outfitted with palm blasters to shoot some kind of energy that I didn't really want to discover. Its metal was painted a navy blue with a white cross between its eyes. On its arms in white paint was the code 48L. The second robot was similar to the first, except regular person-sized, and there were 2 of them. The twin 96E units weren't carrying flaming swords, but black metal scimitars that looked sharp enough to easily cleave off a limb. They looked like muscular versions of the Star Wars B-1 battle droid, but painted navy blue and also very much real. I looked at Jeremy and looked at Marilyn, and realized now was not the time to be concerned about costumes. I nodded to them. Y'all, what just happened? Go to the weapons wall. I'll cover for you. Get me something sharp and hurry. They listened and began to dart towards the wall. Turning to Jo, I spoke to her. Call Dean and Kieran and get them here ASAP. See if you can disable this sequence. If you can't, duck. Jo's eyes began to glow as she stared at the computer. I could almost see the coding in her eyes, and I knew she was trying to hack into a system that was designed to be unhackable. And technopathy was not exactly being very helpful in this particular moment. I prepared for the possibility to throw a force field around Marilyn and Jeremy. The eye receptors of the 48L robot locked on Marilyn, who immediately noticed and went invisible. The robot's eyes switched from regular white to infrared, and I could tell that it was using its heat senses. It charged extremely fast with its swords above its head. I tracked the trajectory with my mind, and assuming that Marilyn hadn't changed direction, I realized that the 48L would strike her. I concentrated on Marilyn and summoned a force field around her. The 48L collided with the force field, and my breath was knocked out of me as it struck the force field with the blade. The field held against the pressure, and I recovered from the shock quite quickly. This was going to be some hell of a challenge. Marilyn and Jeremy reached the wall of weapons, and the 2 96Es were just on their heels. Jeremy crossed his arms defensively in front of him, as if to shield his body. His eyes glowed a purplish blue, and the glimmering of a force field took slight spherical shape in front of him. He gritted his teeth as the energy was building. He suddenly, violently uncrossed his arms, and let out a battle cry as his force field shot out like a shockwave. The sudden explosion of energy hit the 96Es squarely, and they flew back almost all the way to the back wall. The metal screeched along the floor until the robots' heads, for lack of a better thing to call them, hit the wall. That was a pretty neat move that I had never used myself. I'd have to learn how to use that one. One of the robots' heads perked back up, and I took that moment to sprint towards Jeremy and Marilyn. Jeremy grabbed a particularly menacing black Chinese saber with a gold handle. Marilyn grabbed herself a Kyan sword with golden tang and a bronze handle. I selected a pair of bladed tonfa. I chose those because I never got to use weapons that could kill. But it was clear that these robots weren't going to shy away from killing us. Lethal strength seemed necessary. The robots froze for a second, and Jo's voice blasted through the speaker system.
Guys, I can't disable the sequence. I can only hold them for 60 seconds. Get your suits on and prepare to fight.
I turned to Marilyn. Care to teach me that spell now?
You know how you recharge? That's actually a spell. It's a grounding spell. Magic is energy, intent, and exchange. Imagine your suit. Summon the energy it would take to move it from one place to another, and then release that energy towards your goal. Watch me.
She closed her eyes for a second, and she put her hand over her heart. When she spoke next, her voice was layered and reverberating.
Devastation.
There was a slight flash of light as the energy clapped out of existence, and her suit was on her. I followed suit, and I apparently was a very quick study.
Revest him.
On the first try, my suit appeared on me, as though it had transported itself from my messenger bag all the way upstairs, onto my skin. I allowed myself a moment to think of how much more convenient this would be when fighting, before refocusing. Jeremy was in his suit, still holding his Chinese saber. Marilyn and I took our places on either side of him. We glared at the 3 robot units.
Boys, I want that big gem there.
My way, go ahead, baby. I got this one over here. I got the one on the left.
Joe's hold on the robots broke. The robots rushed forward, and we rushed toward them. My 96E was on me quite quickly, and its sword struck my tonfas, creating sparks. It slashed with both blades with laser-like precision. The robot kept swinging, and I kept catching them, though the robot was getting a little too close for comfort. I hadn't fought anyone like this in a long time. The robot's ability to fight seemed to grow as time went on. I was looking for an opening, but this robot was programmed to give no indication of an opening. So it became clear that I'd have to create my own. As the robot brought one of its blades straight down towards my head, I crossed my blades just above my head. I caught the sword at the top of the X that the blades formed, and I raised my foot and slammed it on the 96E's knee joints. The robot faltered back a wee bit, being suddenly a little unbalanced. I used that moment to take my right blade and slash off the robot's right arm. The arm fell to the ground, clattering and reverberating throughout the room. The robot was temporarily stunned, but recovered quickly and began to stand again. I crossed my blades again and closed my eyes. I conjured a force field before me, filling it with a slight bit of extra energy. I figured I would try the move that I had just seen Jeremy do. I filled the force field with a little extra energy, and I let the force field explode out from me, directly into the robot, like a bullet. The force field hit the 96E like a freight train, and he was knocked back about 5 feet. I would have normally paused to cheer about the fact that I discovered a new move, but instead, I got a running start and jumped in the air to gain force. I punched my bladed tonfa through the robot's head. The blade sliced right through every layer of metal and stuck into the ground, pinning the thing down. It twitched and sparked impotently, before failing. I turned to face Marilyn. Marilyn was trying to finish her robot and separate its head from its body. I figured she had it covered so long as she kept going. Jeremy's 96E was causing issues, however. It was swinging wildly. Jeremy's defenses were admirable, but ineffective against this big one. With one particular swing of his obsidian sword, he broke Jeremy's sword and sliced part of his shoulder in the process. Jeremy cried out in pain. I dropped the second tonfa and grabbed for my dart. And it was in this moment that I paused for a second. I realized that I had not as of yet come up with a name for my rope dart. And yet somehow in this moment, I knew what its name had to be. It honestly was a little bit obvious given the bird motif that I had going on. My rope dart from that moment on was named Talon. I shouted out to distract the 96E.
Oi, big guy! Leave my brother alone.
It turned its gaze on me. It picked me out and began firing blasts from its palm. I dodged as best I could and moved toward it. As I got closer, I thought I might deflect some of the blast by spinning the chain in a figure 8 pattern around me to deflect the onslaught of random energy blasts. I had used Talon to deflect bullets in this way, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that this worked on energy bursts as well. The robot realized that its plan wasn't working, and began to advance with its sword arm drawn. I swung my dart at the robot's legs. I slid past it on my knees, striking at the back of its knees with one of my 3 kunais from my belt. This did almost absolutely nothing to the robot, considering this was not its actual Achilles tendon. All it seemed to do was irritate the robot. The robot spun around and tried to bring its flaming sword down on my head, and it only narrowly missed me. I pulled Talon and the robot fell on its back, dropping one of its swords. I was too close to the robot, and it grabbed my ankle and threw me toward the wall. I hit the ground about 8 feet from where it threw me. My breath left my body for a second, and when it came back I tried to stand up. I fell back down, feeling a pain coming from my ankle. It was excruciating and I cried out. I must have sprained it. The 96E had gotten back up and was preparing to launch another energy blast straight at my face. I closed my eyes, preparing to take the blast.
Hey!
The robot looked up just in time to see Dean jumping off the mini balcony, and with his newfound super strength and super speed, he punched the 96E directly in the face. The metal of the robot's face crumpled and buckled, and gave way to Dean's fist. The back of its head and body hit the ground, and Dean straddled the robot's chest. It sparked, and its arm twitched towards Dean. Dean caught it, and releasing a yell, he tore the arm from the robot's body. He threw it at the 48L that Marilyn had been fighting, which at that point was separated from its head by about 9 feet. Dean rapidly punched into the core of the robot, cracking its casing and pulling out all of its important wiring like a squirrel trying to find a particularly tough acorn. He did this until he reached the power source, which he pulled out and crushed in his bare hands. Dean turned to look at me. When I saw the look in his face, I was horrified. I almost didn't recognize him. His face was contorted with rage. His eyes glowed a deep green color, with the energy rising from them like smoke. I'd never seen him that angry before. He was huffing and puffing, emitting a low growl that sounded menacing, like a jungle cat. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. When he reopened them, they were their regular green that they normally had been. I just sat there staring at him, as he looked to me, and then to the robot he'd mutilated, and then to his own hands. Kieran came up to me and began to bandage my ankle. The screen on the back wall came back to life, and the Birdkeeper appeared on the screen, as did an image of my father. My father was slightly older at that point, and in an outfit that I remembered him wearing. It was the outfit he had worn on the day that he had died.
RAU 96E and RAU 48L have been defeated. Sequence 1A completed successfully.
Kieran finished setting my ankle, which I felt bad that he had to do, considering that I was about to heal my body anyway. I didn't use that power in that moment. Kieran helped me stand up and we walked over toward the suits. We stood before the suit of Wilson Lacroix. Up close, I noticed a necklace of animal fangs and a rosary made of bone. I turned to face Kieran.
Kieran, did Joe tell you what this is?
Kieran shook his head. I looked back towards the suit. I whistled to Joe, who was sitting in front of the computer, looking at records that my parents kept. I signaled to Joe to open up the case on the wall. As the case opened, I spoke to Kieran.
This belonged to Wilson Lacroix, your father. My parents say that he was the most powerful medium and witch doctor in the country, and that you'd have his same gift. So I figure that means...
I stepped up and pulled the bodysuit off of the body form, folding it up and handing it neatly to Kieran.
This belongs to you.
I placed the necklace on top. Kieran accepted it from me, running his finger across the necklace and the cross. He smiled, and his head shook slightly.
You know, this actually doesn't surprise me that much. I've heard about this gift before, from my dad.
His face went sour. He put his back against the wall and slid down holding the suit to his chest. He paused, and I could see all of the pain in his eyes.
We all thought he was just going crazy. When he'd go on and on about the spirits and ghosts and all that, we would just roll our eyes and say, "It's just Dad being crazy again." When he started going out at night, we got worried and we told him to get therapy, but nothing was wrong after all. They said he was schizophrenic and delusional, but nothing was wrong. They gave him all those pills and medication, and there was not a single goddamn thing wrong. Which meant nothing was wrong with my brother either. You said this is genetic?
I nodded. Kieran let out a sigh.
Well, I guess that's good then. I wasn't going to tell you, any of you, about this, but I've started seeing people. Seeing people who aren't there. It started as a combat medic. I was seeing soldiers we couldn't save. They'd give me messages for their people back home. I honestly was worried that I was going to wind up... that I would be...
Kieran couldn't continue. The pain was just too great. I put an arm on his shoulder, rested my head against the side of his head. Marilyn came over and kneeled before him. She crooked her finger and cupped it underneath his chin, bringing his eyes to meet hers.
The best way to honor his memory is to honor his mantle. His blood runs through you. His power runs through you. I learned this when I discovered the truth about my mother and her powers. Give it time. You'll have your entire team on your side.
She kissed Kieran's forehead and hugged him lightly. I thought that was a bit bold, considering they had only just met. But it didn't take a genius to see, looking in Kieran's eyes, that being that close to Marilyn was a dream come true. I smiled at the possible connection that was forming between them. I had a sudden realization, and I strolled back to where Joanna was sitting, leaving Marilyn and Kieran to talk.
Hey Joe, can you do me a favor and keep it quiet?
Yeah, what's up?
Text Scarlett and tell her I'm coming to her place. I just realized something really big is happening, and I have to get ready. I'll tell you what it is at home.
You got it. Should I keep people here for now?
I looked around the room and nodded.
See if you can look into Cassandra Payne. We need as much info on her as we possibly can get. And see if you and Marilyn can go about getting these old suits ready for everyone.
Sure, but I'm gonna leave your mom and dad's alone, at least for now.
I'll see you soon, Joe.
Get home safe, Jordan.
Always do, Joe.
As soon as I got to the elevator, I heard Dean calling my name.
Jordan, wait up.
I bristled, but I turned to look at him over my shoulder.
Oh, Dean, hey. Listen, I want you to stay with the others. I have something that I have to go and do.
I tried to put a half smile on my face, but my eyebrows furrowed against my will.
Why? What's wrong?
So are we just gonna pretend that I didn't just watch you go into a werewolf rage and rip the heart out of a robot?
He looked like he was going to have a rebuttal, but he stopped and looked ashamed.
I don't know what came over me. I just got so scared that it would kill you.
So you disarm it, or you disable it. You went in for the kill, babe, and then you went into overkill.
I noticed an edge sneaking into my voice. I thought about trying to tone it down, but I couldn't. He didn't understand that his actions in there meant so much more than just what he would do to keep me alive.
I just saved your life, Jordan.
You did a lot more than just that. What if it had been a person?
I would do anything to keep you safe. You know that. Anything. I love you.
Even murder?
If that's what it took, then yes.
That is wrong. That is reckless. And I never want you to kill for me. If you're going to be in my life, my bed, or on this team, you have to keep yourself under control.
I paused, trying to bite back my next comment, but I couldn't stop it from falling out of my mouth.
The last time you lost control, you broke my heart. How am I supposed to trust your control over who you fuck if I can't even trust you to hold yourself together in battle?
Dean looked as though I had slapped him. The elevator dinged behind me, and I stepped into it, leaving Dean behind. It only took the elevator getting to the library for me to feel the full effect of how much of a dick I was to Dean. Blaming someone for being under literal mind control didn't make sense to do. He was no more in control in that moment than I was when Alejandro told me to drop my dart. I didn't blame the guy who tried to kill Jared, who was under Al's influence as the prince, because I knew he didn't want to do it. But at what point does that end? And how true was it that he didn't want to? How could I know that he didn't in that moment want to hurt me? My mind flashed back to what Al had said when he hovered above me trying to screw with my brain.
I didn't have to use my powers. He wanted to do it. He wanted to hurt you.
The crazy thing is, I almost believe Alejandro. Really, at that point, why would Al have tried to lie to me? He was in the middle of his villain monologuing when they reveal their full plan and motivation, and the hero rolls their eyes repeatedly. But this part had struck a chord with me. When Dean was a kid, his moms put him in therapy after a few outbursts and a few fights in school. They put him in karate to channel some of that aggression, as well as wrestling, and briefly football. The day he met me, his mothers told me later on, he calmed down and smiled more than he had since he was a child. He'd contained himself, controlled his rage naturally. He apparently controlled himself for the next 14 years, with the exception of one moment in particular. During the early part of Dean and I actually dating, when I was still in college, he got jealous at how some of the guys were looking at me. This resulted in later on me patching a hole in my dorm wall, using my powers after he had stormed out. We made up after that, and otherwise he had been fine. He never laid a hand on me, so I wasn't afraid of him. I never felt afraid around him, and I never felt afraid of him. Hell, I never was even afraid of losing him. So why was I doubting him this much now? Also, why am I even worrying about this now? There is a much bigger issue at hand. I arrived at Scarlett's tiny house. She opened the door just before I knocked.
Come in, come in.
She beckoned me in, and I sat down at the same table where she had told me my future. She sat across from me and looked into my eyes. I felt her energy touch my mind, which felt gentle and nearly imperceptible, like a downy feather landing on your arm. I showed her my discovery by thinking of an image.
My God, it can't be.
Oh, it is. And I realized that something really big is coming tomorrow. The anniversary of my parents' death is tomorrow. And I think I know what that big thing is. And if I'm right, it could level the entire city. We need to prepare for it. I need you to teach me how to break that kind of spell.
She nodded, got up, and grabbed some supplies from inside her house, and then she wrote down the instructions. After setting up for the next day, I decided to walk back home. I decided to walk past the cemetery and see my parents' plot. It was only a few minutes out of the way. The moon was just a crescent in the sky, but it illuminated the ground so beautifully. Everything looked melancholic, which, given that it was a cemetery, felt just about right. I sat down in front of Mom and Dad's grave. I stared at the stone for a second. I put my face in my hands, ruffled my own hair, and let out a puff of air. Well, Mom and Dad, I guess y'all are probably seeing this from wherever you are, but life just got really, really crazy. Understatement of the year, I know. And I don't know what to make of any of it. I guess I'm just here really to tell you that I'm confused. I'm tired. But I have a plan. I'm here because I need to ask your forgiveness. I closed my eyes and waited for a moment. I felt the wind whip across my face. I could have sworn that on the breeze I smelt my mother's perfume. I imagined that the wind was her gentle caress on my cheek, letting me know that everything would be okay. If this doesn't go the way I want it to, well, really regardless of how things go tomorrow, someone from our family will be dead by tomorrow night. And whoever it winds up being, it'll be at my hand. I know I promised that I wouldn't kill, and I promise that I will try to not kill. But I have to protect this city, even if it means laying down my own life. It's what you would have expected from me. I don't know if I can stop death. And if I can't stop it, I'm sorry. But this city will not fall. I made that promise to you, Mom. And I promise you now, Mom and Dad, this city will never fall. Thank you for listening to RedWing, the audio drama podcast. RedWing is written, directed, and produced by J.V. Hampton Van Sant. That's me. The cast of RedWing includes J.V. Hampton Van Sant, Amanda Jacobson, Chris Green, Dane Shiner, Simon Weeks, Christine Osimo, Skylar Paring, John Buckley, Brittany Nicholson, Lucy Fitzgerald, Kenyon Lang, Katie Hearn Church, Nathan Foster, Atticus Jackson, Rhett Hall, and Kiara Jeter as Birdkeeper. RedWing's official musician extraordinaire is Nico from We Talk of Dreams. Additional music from Kevin MacLeod. The RedWing logo is designed by J.V. Hampton Van Sant, and official character art is from the fantastic Click Art Studios. We would like to thank the following shows for being inspirations and or being involved in the podcast itself. Wine and Crime, Crime and Color, Queen's Podcast, Brain Trust Brothers Podcast, Gravity Beard, The No Sleep Podcast, Conjuria, The Cryptid Keeper, Deliberations, Getting Off Podcast, Spirits Podcast, the entire family at Blazing Caribou Studios, and everyone in the #AudioDramaSunday family. If you would like to support the show, buy official RedWing merchandise, or if you just want to stay in touch, all of our links are in the show notes and on our website, redwingpodcast.com. Be well, stay safe, and fly high, heroes.